In round one against the Heat, the Cavs had the most efficient 4-game stretch of playoff offense in NBA history, and that was after a season where they finished with the second most efficient offense ever. Well, in last year's playoffs, the Pacers had the 4th most efficient offense of any team to ever make the second round, and they replicated that exact performance this year against the Bucks, taking care of them in 5 games. Basically, the point I'm trying to make is that in this second round matchup, we're looking at 2 of the best offensive teams ever. From top to bottom, these rosters are loaded with ball handlers, shooters, and playmakers, both run very advanced schemes, and we're probably in store for one of the best offensive matchups in NBA playoff history. On the side of Indiana, it's no secret that priority number 1 for any defense is to get back and limit opportunities in transition. Whether it's after a missed shot, a turnover, or even a made shot, the Pacers are looking to get out and run, and if you don't get back, you're gonna end up giving them lots of easy points. And I think the first thing that the Cavs will be forced to make a decision on is whether or not they want to crash the offensive glass. They've got 2 big-time offensive rebounders, but they also rely on those 2 guys to be their last line of defense inside, creating a tough situation. You could argue that Indiana's biggest weakness is their size and physicality, so the Cavs could overwhelm them by hunting for second chances. The problem is that anytime they don't get them, now the Pacers are out and running against guards, which means lots of layups and corner threes. During the minutes with both of their bigs on the court, I'd expect them to have one crash the glass while the other gets back, which sort of solves the problem. But in all of those other minutes, I don't think they'll be hunting for many offensive rebounds, instead prioritizing the transition defense. If you include both volume and efficiency, the Cavs had the number 11 transition defense this season, giving up about 2 net points every 100 possessions, so I don't really view this as a strength or a weakness for them. The second thing you have to worry about with defending Indiana's offense is how you plan to approach ball screens, most notably with Haliburton and a stretch big. The Bucks tried a little bit of everything in the first round. When Lopez was on the court, they tried dropping, to which he lacked the foot speed to recover. They tried dropping, then sending help over from the weak side to take away the pop, to which the Pacers countered through their high-level passing and efficient outside shooting, and they also tried keeping Lopez out of the action by going to some zone, only for Indiana to set up the floor in a way that forced him to defend in space, to which they got back to creating constant advantages. By the end of the series, Lopez was essentially played off the court. They started running more lineups with a front court pairing of Giannis and Portis alongside 3 wings, and the idea was to switch all of these ball screens to limit those advantages. I think this worked a lot better, and it led to a few more dry spells for the Pacers, but that offense still has more than enough talent to attack switching. Between Haliburton, McConnell, and Nembhard, that's 3 guards who can all get around bigs off the dribble without much trouble, which then puts the rest of the defense in rotation, so you're back to square one. They've also got physical wings in Mathurin and Nesmith who aren't necessarily isolation maestros, but know how to attack smaller defenders and create pressure on the basket. And then their ultimate counter, sort of a cheat code against switching, was Pascal Siakam, who very quietly has developed into one of the best post scorers in the NBA. If you include both the regular season and the playoffs, over the past 2 seasons, Siakam has attempted to score on over 540 post-ups, and on those plays, he's generated 1.12 points per possession, which is remarkably efficient. For some added context, the league average half-court offense this season generated just under 0.98 points per play, meaning that a Siakam post-up from the last 2 seasons has been worth about 14 points above average. And that's without specifically looking for post-ups against mismatches, so if your game plan is to consistently let him get the switch onto a guard, he will torch you. This is where things get really interesting for the Cavs on defense. I think Mobley can pretty much play Siakam to a stalemate, and anytime those 2 are matched up, I wouldn't expect Pascal to get much offense going in isolation. But the Cavs really like to switch with Mobley, especially when he's at the 5 with the bench unit, and of the Cavs' typical 9-man rotation, 5 of them are shorter than 6'6". So I think Pascal is sort of the X factor. If the Cavs decide to switch, his isolation play becomes arguably the most important part of their offense. But if they're running a more traditional coverage, then it becomes more about how the guards create advantages. Going back to the pick and pop between Halliburton and Turner, I don't think they'll have nearly as much trouble defending it as the Bucks did for a few reasons. For one, the difference in mobility between Allen and Lopez is extremely apparent. Lopez not only struggles to close to the perimeter after playing the ball, he's completely incapable of switching onto smaller players. The Cavs, on the other hand, actually like to have Allen switch a lot, which we saw in those marquee matchups against Boston and OKC, so I'd expect them to deploy sort of a drop into a switch strategy, sort of like what the Wolves did against the Lakers with Gobert, having that guard peel onto the shooter to not give up a three. This way you're able to force more one-on-one play, and although those guards probably will be able to get around Allen a lot of times, I think there's a huge difference between how they rotate and how the Bucks did. Instead of one great rim protector in Giannis, they've got two of the best in the league with Mobley and Allen. And this means that when Indiana's playing off of an advantage and moving the ball, the other guards are able to overplay the three, funneling drives into one of those bigs, and the offense can't really create layups or dunks. In the first round, the offense had an instant advantage as soon as Giannis got switched onto the ball, because if he got beat, there was nobody else to protect the rim. Against the Cavs in starting and closing lineups, if you get Mobley or Allen switched onto the ball, the other is still somewhere on the floor, which makes it a lot easier to bottle up these isolations. Another wrinkle I didn't even address on the Cavs side is that if they're struggling to deal with Siakam's size or can't contain the ball against switches, they can get Dean Wade on the court, who's a 6'9" wing that can defend all 5 positions. They can also turn to DeAndre Hunter, another big, switchable wing, which means that they're able to size up without sacrificing speed or spacing on offense, something that the Pacers simply don't have the luxury of doing. As far as Indiana's guard-to-guard screening action goes, the Cavs to me pretty easily switch all of these. It's not like they have some elite point-of-attack defender that they want to keep on the ball anyways. The difference between any one of their 5 guards isn't that big, so whoever the Pacers are looking to hunt for will probably just pick up the ball, knowing that they've got that elite rim protection behind the play. So in totality, I think the Cavs can slow down Indiana's offense at least a little bit more than the Bucks did. Milwaukee didn't have any big wings who could defend multiple positions, and their switch-heavy lineups usually featured 3 small guards. Their best paint protector got played out of the series, then they relied on one guy to carry all of the rim protection duties, while the Cavs have at least 2 who can operate in these spots. They're also a better transition defense, so I think they'll be able to force more isolation play in the half court, to which they're better equipped to defend. With all of that said though, there's a reason this Pacers team is consistently as efficient as they are. At all times, they have at least 4 players on the court who can all dribble, pass, and shoot. They've got arguably the best decision maker in the NBA running the show, and if you saw how he was shooting in the first round, he's due for some positive regression, so I'm expecting some big scoring performances from him. They've got one of the best mismatch attackers in the NBA, who could serve as a counter to Cleveland's switching, and regardless of how well a defense does in transition, they're still gonna find ways to get points in the open floor. So I'm still expecting the Pacers to be a mostly good offense in this series. Where you start to run into some serious problems is when you question whether or not it'll be enough to keep up with the Cavs. Like I said earlier, this team is an absolute offensive juggernaut. And instead of beating around the bush for a few minutes, I'll be completely honest, I don't think the Pacers have any chance of slowing them down. In the first round, they had 7 different players who averaged at least 11 points on above 61% true shooting. As a team, they had a true shooting percentage of 66.5 and an offensive rating of 136.6. So we're talking about unrivaled levels of efficiency. And that's the result of a multi-layered attack. Every time down the court, you have no idea what type of action they're going to set up or who's even going to be in control of the ball. Just like Indiana, it starts in the open floor, and actually the Cavs had the most efficient transition offense in the NBA this season, generating over 1.2 points per possession. And that part of their game alone has so many layers. They've unleashed Mobley as a Giannis light through his presence as a downhill athlete, which means that the Pacers are going to have a rim protector back at all times. If the defense is back, then the ball's going to run through one of their many guards, and they'll probably set up some early screening action. This is where the pick and roll becomes a huge problem. Garland, Mitchell, and Jerome were three of the best pick and roll scorers in the NBA this season, and all are capable of picking apart aggressive coverages with their passing. So now it's on the Pacers to stop these actions, and they don't have a Mobley or an Allen in the middle to make things easy. Turner's a pretty good rim protector, but isn't the greatest drop defender. So if you're consistently dropping him against a lob threat, things aren't gonna look good. But as soon as you bring him up to the level of screens, now one of those bigs is catching the ball in the short roll while the other dives from the corner, to which the Pacers simply do not have the personnel to defend. In my opinion, the only way to prevent the Cavs from creating easy points out of the pick and roll is to switch effectively. The problem is that no big in the league can consistently switch onto either Garland or Mitchell, then prevent them from creating constant dribble penetration, so now you're in rotation, and we saw against the Bucks that Indiana simply isn't a good defense in rotation. That will be dialed up to another level in this series, as Cleveland probably has the best ball movement and second side attacking of any team in the NBA. Another problem with switching is that Mobley has become one of the better mismatch attackers in the league. So even if you found a way to stop Garland or Mitchell, now one of your guards is against Mobley on an island. And again, this is especially a problem for the Pacers because they play a lot of guys who really can't switch. Halliburton's a pretty weak on-ball defender, McConnell's really only effective against smaller guards, and Turner and Bryant are both liable to be hunted in space with no sort of secondary rim protection. Nembhard's ball pressure is probably the best part about this defense, but the impact of that is completely negated in this series because the Cavs have 2 point guards on the floor at all times, so they'll just simply have someone else bring the ball up and get into action. I don't think there's a tactical way to really slow down this Cavs offense. You can't just force them to make threes because basically their entire rotation shoots 40%. You can't just run them off the line because they've got elite decision makers, athletes, and most importantly, size to score inside. You can't put 2 on the ball because they've got the extra passing to consistently pick apart rotations, and you can't drop against ball screens because not only are they going to get downhill and create lobs, they've got the best group of pull-up shooters in the NBA. Like I said earlier, I think the only way to really slow down the Cavs offense is to switch, then you have to have the personnel to avoid mismatches. The Pacers simply don't have the personnel, and it's not really their fault because I can only think of 2 teams who do, the Celtics and the Thunder. I guess that brings me to a much larger point on the Cavs overall, and how I think we're all collectively sort of overlooking how historically good they are. It's not just the 64 wins or the all-time efficient offense, it's the fact that they pretty much check every box across the board on both sides of the ball, except for elite point of attack defense. And in this matchup specifically, they play all of Indiana's strengths to a stalemate. Let's actually list some of them out. When you think of the Pacers, some of the biggest qualities that come to mind are their transition offense, their spacing and overall shooting, their ball movement and extra passing, and of course the way they take care of the ball. Now let's think about how that stacks up against the Cavs. Cleveland was the more efficient transition offense, they took more threes and made them at a higher clip, and have more vertical spacing. They are every bit as good at moving the ball and extending advantages with their passing, and they somehow averaged even less turnovers, ranking 3rd and 4th respectively. All things considered, there's probably a lot of overthinking going on with this series. The Cavs have been the better team all season long, they looked better in the first round, they are better at the Pacers' strengths, and have less weaknesses. For those reasons, I'm very confidently picking them to win. If I had to make a prediction on games, I'd expect it to happen in 5, but it'd be a close 5 games where Indiana really makes them work to close out games down the stretch as opposed to some blowout. I wouldn't be surprised if the Cavs pull off a sweep, but I also wouldn't be surprised if the Pacers force it to 7 games. The only outcome that would surprise me is the Pacers finding a way to win, and it has less to do with them as a team and more to do with the fact that the Cavs are just that good. Indiana's really good, and they're gonna be an extremely tough out for any team. But in this series, I think Cleveland has an overwhelming advantage and should find themselves advancing to the Eastern Conference Finals. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out the Hoop Venue podcast and my social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you think's gonna happen in this series. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.